Hi guys, it's Annie. Welcome back to BloomTV. Today I am going to do my June 2014 wrap up, and in total this month I read 12 books, which I think is really successful. I read one huge book which was like 800 pages, and I also got in a reading slump for about a week where I really didn't read anything. So the fact that over 3 weeks I managed to read the 12 books is quite a successful achievement, I think. And the first three books I read are actually from the library, so I don't have them with me. I'm going to just kind of rush through them. And the first one is This Lullaby by Sarah Dessen. And if you've read any of Sarah Dessen's books, you know they're quite similar in like their summer contemporary reads mostly, and they're all, I find, all quite similar in plotline, although different characters and very different settings. But I always find that the plot lines are quite similar in like how the romance is planned out is always quite similar, which is something that I don't like as much. But I still think her books are really good summer contemporary reads, and I'd really recommend them if you haven't picked them up already. And the second book I read from the library is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, and this is from an idea developed by Siobhan Dowd, whose books I really love. Like I read them a lot when I was growing up, like in that period between like the age of 9 and 12 to 13. I really read her books a lot and really enjoyed them. So I was expecting to really like this anyway because it was from an idea by her. And the illustrations in this book, I can't remember who they were by, I'm sorry, but they were beautiful. I borrowed the illustrated edition, and just the illustrations were so gorgeous, and I think that's what really made me enjoy this book a lot more. And it also made me want to read Patrick Ness's other books, which I've tried the first book from the Chaos Walking trilogy and I just didn't get on with it. It was a couple of years ago now, but I think I need to pick it up and try again because I really enjoyed A Monster Calls. And then the last book I got from the library and read was You Against Me by Jenny Downham, and this was such a good book. I've kind of been seeing it around, but I've never been really like influenced to go and pick it up, but it's so good. It's set in Britain and it follows two points of view. No, it doesn't follow two points of view, but it follows one character. No, two. It follows two points of view. It follows Ellie and Mikey, and they are involved not directly, but through siblings. They are involved through a case of sexual assault, which happens to a teenager, and it's just brilliant. Firstly, I enjoyed it because it dealt with that issue, and I think I've never really read anything that dealt with an issue like that in YA anyway, and I'm just so glad that a book like that exists. I mean, I'm not sure how correct it was, like with all the legal information, but I'm sure it would have been pretty correct, and it was just really a really good read, and I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did, and I just really liked it, so I'd definitely highly recommend it. And then I have a whole pile of books here which I need to talk about, and the first one is Northanger Abbey, a retelling by Val McDermid, and this is part of the Austen Project, which is all six of Jane Austen's novels being rewritten by famous authors, and this is the second one. I've owned and have read the first one, which is Joanna Trollope's rewrite of Sense and Sensibility, which I really liked, and this is the second one, and the third is not going to be published until autumn, I do not think, but this was so good. I enjoyed it more than Sense and Sensibility purely because I think Val McDermid tried to kind of take Jane Austen's style of writing and put it in her rewrite. I think she kind of more brought that sense of Austen's writing to this retelling, which I think Joanna Trollope didn't as much. And also Northanger Abbey is one of my favourite Austens anyway, because Henry Tilney basically, and I thought he was really well written in this rewrite, and this was just generally really good and I really enjoyed it. And if you haven't read any Jane Austen but you want to get into it, I'd really recommend reading these first, or if you haven't even heard of the Austen Project, check it out. It's a really great project, and I might do a whole video on it soon, just because I think these books are great and it's such a great idea as well. And then the second book I read, I'm not going to go into too much because I've already done a review of this, and it is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, and this is my first Neil Gaiman book and I really enjoyed it. It was so good, but I've already got a review about this, so I'll leave that linked below, or you can find it on my channel. It was the previous video to this one, so I'll leave that there so you can check that out to see what I thought of that. And then the next book I read was kind of a continuing of the series for me, and it is Blood Promise by Rochelle Mead. I was going to buy this, but then I saw they had it in the library, so I was just thought I'd pick it up. And I also read this really quickly, even though it's about 500 pages. But I always find that I read the Vampire Academy books really quickly. And this was really good. I can't really give you a synopsis because this is a continuation of a series. I think it's the fourth in a series of 6 books. But I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really good, action paced, and if you like vampires, then I'd recommend this series, or strong kick-ass heroines. I do recommend this series. And then the next book I read, purely because I felt so out of the loop for not reading it, and it is Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. And I haven't read this series, and I feel like really bad for not reading them. I think this series is a bit, I hate to compare stuff to Harry Potter, but I feel it has that kind of air that Harry Potter has, that like if you haven't read it you kind of feel out of jokes and stuff. And I know this has been made into a film, and that I haven't seen it, but I've heard that the film is a terrible adaptation of the book. Like, it just really didn't stick close to the plotline at all. So I'm not sure if I'm going to watch it or not. I don't know. I'll see. But I really enjoyed this. It's a middle grade series. And the main thing I liked about this was how much I learned about Greek mythology. I thought it was really interesting and educational like that. I think with children in like children's/middle grade books, when they have extra educational information in it that's correct, I think that's so great. Like, as well as telling a story, there's all these extra historical elements in there that are correct, then I think that's brilliant, you know, because it's got a double point. And I just really enjoyed this, and I've got the second book from the library, so I'll probably continue on with this series, but not like, I don't think I'm going to marathon it or anything, but I will definitely continue with it because I enjoyed this a lot. And then the next book I read was The Museum of Intangible Things by Wendy Winder. My mum brought this for me as an end of exams present, kindly, and I really enjoyed this. This follows 2 best friends. There's Hannah, the main character, who the story is told from her perspective, and we follow her adventures and kind of the time that she spends with her best friend Zoe, who has bipolar. And Zoe decides they need to go on a road trip to get away from their town where nothing really happens, like nobody ever goes somewhere, they all stay there, and a lot of their parents have alcoholics or are just not exactly the most shining examples of parenting. But I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really good. It had a very strange and bizarre ending. I'd describe this book is quite quirky. Quirky is a good way to describe it. I didn't necessarily agree with all of Hannah's kind of actions, but I did really still enjoy this, and I thought it was told really well, and I'm glad to see bipolar being explored in YA because I think it's important. And then the next book I read was something I have been putting off for the longest time, and it is Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. I have the HBO tie-in edition. This was just, I have been wanting to read this series for about a year, 2 years, but I was really put off by, a lot of my friends told me I wouldn't enjoy it because I'm really bad with blood and gore, and these are quite explicit in that way. Definitely contains some adult themes, but this was such a good book. I'm so glad I read it. Like, I really love the complexity of the book. That's what I think the main drawing factor is for this series, is that how complex they are, and they're just really well written, and I thought it was going to be really difficult to get into, but it wasn't, and I'm so glad I read this. And I actually started A Clash of Kings, which you can see there on my bookshelf. I only got about 250 pages in, and I started reading it straight after I read this one, and it just put me in a reading slump, just purely because I think I'd come from this one and I jumped straight into like another 1,000 page book, and they're so complex, and I think I just needed a bit of a break from Game of Thrones, to be honest. So I kind of had to put it down after a week of not really reading very much. But I'm so glad I've started this series, and I'll definitely be continuing with it because I also really want to watch the TV show. And then one of the last books I read is The One by Kiera Cass. I think that's how you say her first name. And this is the last book in the Selection trilogy, so again, I can't give you a synopsis, but I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a really good ending to a really good series, and like the Ruby Red trilogy, this is such a fun series to read. They're really entertaining, and I really like the character of America, and I also really like Maxon as well, and I like their relationship that they have. The only thing is, I think I really would have liked to have seen more of the world building. This is a dystopian series which focuses more on romance. So if you going into this series and you're expecting a really complex dystopian world where it's the world is more I'd say developed or explored, then I wouldn't recommend this if that's what you're looking for. But if you're looking for a dystopian romance, then I'd really highly recommend this series, and they're just such fun to read, and they're really short as well. Again, I read this in a day. Oops, I have to like slow down my reading rates. And then the last two books I read are finishing off of this series, and they are Unravel Me and Ignite Me by Tahera Mafi, and this was just such a good ending to the series, especially Ignite Me. I think I'm going to do a full series review, like a non-spoiler series review for this trilogy, because I just think they're really... What I love about this series is, again, it's a more romantic focused dystopian series, but I think the characters have such a really well laid out, and they have such great character arcs throughout this series. Like in some series you really don't see much character development over, which to me frustrates me, because it's over a long period of time and a lot of events have happened, but the characters haven't developed with those events. With these books, they definitely have, especially Julia. I love her character development, and Warner's. And I just think these, Ignite Me especially, I really enjoyed. Actually, Ignite Me I read just in one sitting. I was ill on the weekend and I just flew through it. It was so good, and I'm really glad, because I was a bit unsure after reading Shatter Me, as I definitely wanted to continue on, but I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy these books, but I really did, and I'd really highly recommend them. I think they're really good, and the covers are beautiful, and as Tahera Mafi says on her website, they're really symbolic, which I really like, and I think they're really pretty. They freak my mum out with the eyes. But that is all I read in June, and I think I had a pretty successful reading month. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought, and what your favourite book was that you read in June, and I'll see you soon. Bye!